Okay, Mr. Chair, we're low intake here.
Okay. 3 o'clock, yeah, we'll start a minute early. I'll call the January 9th, 2024 meeting of the West Dakota Water Development District to order. And the first item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The next item is the roll call. Dan?
Okay. Okay, roll call for January 9th, 2024. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Post. Here. Pierkey.
Here.
Driscoll. Here. McGregor.
Here.
Ackerman.
Here.
Rowe. Mack.
Here.
Fleming.
Here.
Hare.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum, Mr. Chair. I have one absent.
Okay, thank you.
Director Rowe.
The next item is the approval of today's agenda. Are there any items that we need to adjust or add at this time? If not, I'd entertain a motion for approval.
So move.
So moved by Scott. Second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Dennis. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next item is the approval of the minutes of the December 12th, 2023 meeting.
There's one very minor change, or
Okay.
it appears to be an error on page 7. Did you get that, Dan, that I'd emailed to you?
On page 7. What is it?
Under item 21, it says Glenn Lepp. It's missing a word there. I assume it would have been called with concerns or something like that. Are you there, Dan?
I'm sorry, what page?
Page 7.
7.
Item 21.
First line. That called with concerns, okay.
Oh, I got the wrong page.
Do you want to insert the word called?
Right, we'll give him time to get there.
Okay.
Okay, I got it.
And then in the second sentence it says the ditch rider actually owns the ditch. I think it's the ditch company that would
That's correct.
own the ditch.
It would be
So,
this company.
Okay, so I'll put in Glenn Lepp called with concerns, and then the ditch company actually owns the ditch.
if that's correct.
Okay.
I got it.
Okay, very good. Is there any other items that need to be adjusted? If not, I'm going to
Move to approve.
Move to approve with the changes.
Second.
Second by Robert. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
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 Same sign. Motion carries. The next item is conflict of interest disclosure. Are there any items on tonight's agenda that any of the directors would have a conflict of interest with? If not, seeing none, we'll move on to the next item, number 6. Election of officers. As by codified law 46A-3B-11. If you look at the item that has the, let me get back to it here, on elections. There's some verbiage that Dan added regarding election of officers that will direct for the board of directors. So there's a couple of ways that we can do it. We can do each one individually, or if there's a slate of officers presented to the board, we could vote on a slate of officers.
Are there any current officers who would not be willing to serve another term?
I have not heard from anybody personally, and I am willing to serve another
How about the rest of you?
year.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I'd move that we unanimously re-elect our current officers for another term.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Dan. Discussion on the motion. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Got another year. Then I'm done.
That's what you say.
Okay, the next item is set the meeting schedule for 2024. In the packet, Dan's outlined the normal months that we have and dates that we have our regular meetings. There's 7 meetings for the entire year, including this one. And then also the 14th of January of 2025, which is our annual meeting. Any issues with any of those dates? Months and dates? I guess we'll entertain a motion for approval of the dates for our meetings for 2024. Motion by Ron, seconded by Thomas. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item number 8 is to designate official newspapers for this year. We currently have 3 newspapers that we use for advertising our minutes and so forth. Rapid City Journal, Hill City Prevailer, and the Wall Current.
Mr. Chairman, I'd move approval of the Hill City Prevailer and Wall Current as our legal newspapers for the coming year.
Okay, is there a second to the motion? Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Craig Kerr by phone.
Yep.
Okay, discussion on the motion.
Mr. Chairman, I just see no benefit in spending the money for the Rapid City Journal. It's never available. Everything's online. You can hit the right days when it's actually got to put something in there. You know, the old days of being able to read the legal notices and print on there, just don't exist anymore with that paper. I'd be really hard pressed to believe that, anybody ever reads legal notices in the Rapid City Journal anymore.
Or anywhere for that matter.
Or ever did.
Well, just a little history there. In past meetings, past board members, there was quite a bit of discussion on which papers that we would do advertising on, minutes and so forth, and legal notices. And so the reason that those 3 ended up being the ones that we picked was because they kind of spread out. They're spread out in our area. So I don't think there's any. I think we have to have just one, right? Just legally.
There's no requirement we have more than one.
So okay, so 2 is fine.
I didn't get the motion.
The motion was to have the Hill City Prevailer and the Wall Current be our official newspapers for this year.
Aye, second.
I have a question.
Yeah.
In your, because of your background, do you see legal notices in like the Hill City paper or the Wall paper at all? Or
On occasion, if there's, they're printed if the item under consideration is in those communities.
now most of these,
But I don't know what the current practice is. I mean, I wasn't in practice the last 20 years when I needed to worry about that. But I don't ever recall even clicking through the journal anymore and seeing newspapers.
Craig,
gotta go on mute, man.
are you
I'm sorry.
I guess
are you reading the Rapid City Journal?
I read
checking
it
Hill City
every
Prevailer.
day. I read it online.
Yeah,
Takes
yeah.
about 15 seconds.
Who seconded that motion? Was that
I did.
Craig? You seconded. Okay.
So to play devil's advocate, because I'm not going to argue the point as
Yeah.
dealing with the journal and all that, with it being the official paper, or what I believe would have been the official paper of record out west, on the western part of the state, That would be my only hang up, but I completely understand where you're coming from and probably will support the motion.
So, in any paper we choose to designate is gonna be our official paper of record, and I would suspect that people that are interested in reading the minutes of our proceedings are more likely to do so off our website
That's where I was going.
than the paper.
Yeah,
I think they'll read it off our website before they look at a paper.
No kidding.
I would agree with that. So we have a motion on the floor. Do you have a question?
Well, I just wanted to clarify, we don't publish our minutes. We send them to the newspaper, we're required to, but they don't usually publish them. So the only things we publish are the budget notice, and maybe the financial report, I can't remember now, but minutes usually don't show up anyway.
Okay.
Well, I would suspect if that's true, that the people who are more interested in financial aspects would be those that would read the Current and the Prevailer,
Right.
rather than the general public with the Journal.
Yeah, petitions we publish too, I should add that.
Petitions for
Yeah.
candidacies.
Yeah.
All that stuff goes on our website as well, is that correct, Dan?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, but this doesn't prevent us from, publishing anything with the Journal at any time we'd want to.
That's
This
true.
is just our official designation of what
Yeah,
we're going
we need
to
to
consider
have one.
our legal papers of record.
Right.
I mean, we could name the Sioux Falls Argus Leader if we wanted to, but it's in probably worse shape than the Journal now.
Any more discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, we're gonna have, the Hill City Prevailer and the Wall Current as our official newspapers. All in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. The next item is the treasurer's report. Dan?
Yep. That's an easy one. Because the treasurer's report goes, our fiscal year is our calendar year, there's not much on it. We have in savings and checking $149,100. And then we have four CDs with Raymond James. One at $159,000, one at $99,000, one at $246,000, and one at $10,000. And so the total of everything, savings and checking and CDs, is $663,100.51. And really the only expenses we had were the director's pay, so the total expenditures are $3,615.50. Or that's the project expenditures. So I guess we did have the Bureau of Rec invoice that was approved last time, that was paid this year, so that's why that's on there. So the total with that and the directors and some miscellaneous stuff, will be $4,506.92. Our maximum, or our tax levy we can expect this year is $249,756. And I'll note that those CDs we have to think about, they're coming due in either May, June, or August, depending on the particular CD. We're reaching maturity date. The projects are listed, they're pretty much up to date. There's maybe one receipt that isn't in there yet. And total project obligations are $312,000 or $312,275. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Any questions on the treasurer's report from any of the board?
Why are the director's expenses $941? What else is in there other than?
Well, there's mileage it makes it an odd number.
Oh,
That's-
okay.
Yeah.
Move to approve.
Moved by Ron to approve. Is there a second? Second. Seconded by Robert. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Pose same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Dan. Okay, item number 10. Approve pursuing the development of a proposal / application to SDDANR for a watershed improvement project within the boundaries of the West Dakota Water Development District. And that's Dan Driscoll's item. You have the floor.
So, you all recall that at last month's meeting, we had Chris Dozark and Paul Lorenzen here to tell us a little bit about the possibilities regarding a 319 project, which would be within the area of the Pennington County boundaries, was the way it has been conceptualized. As we discussed the last time, they had come to us at our special meeting in November talking about possibilities of a Black Hills wide program, and it seemed like that was going to be pretty difficult to really try to get something like that started, and just the West Dakota area seemed much more manageable, and they kind of latched on to that idea. They had intended to be here again this meeting to talk about some more details. The reason they're not here seems almost unbelievable, but they had posed a question to EPA basically the week before our last month's meeting, asking if a project that would focus on sediment reduction, some of the erosion control things that we're doing, and that just being a cornerstone, not necessarily, there'd probably be other activities besides that, but a month later they have not heard back from EPA regarding that. So they had really wanted to basically get confirmation that that would in fact be an allowable sort of activity for an implementation project, and so they decided it'd be best to wait until our next meeting to attend. I'd hoped that we could hear a little more and really start talking in a little bit more detail about what our next steps might be. The application, if we do forge ahead with submitting one, will be due October 1st, and there's an awful lot of things that would need to be done to make that happen. A 2-month delay, I don't think by any means will kill us, and that's just the way it is. So with that as background, my intent had been that this would be a voting item, that basically I would ask the board to approve that we would pursue a project such as this. Really conceptually, it by no means would be locking in dollar amounts or anything, just looking to forge ahead with turning the wheels on it. I'm aware that we wouldn't necessarily have to vote on that. We could do so without a vote to that extent. I guess my thought was that, entering into this endeavor is going to be a pretty substantial time commitment, probably largely on my end. There's going to be an awful lot of coordination with them to really turn the wheels, to line up project partners and begin the process of starting an application. So that had been my intent, and I guess before we make any motions or anything, I'd just like to throw it up for discussion if we want to do that. I mean, I'm aware we could just form a committee to do this, or we could do it without a committee, but I'd just like to hear from the board, thoughts on whether or not we would want to forge ahead voting to approve that we would start developing this, or if we'd prefer not to vote on it, so.
I would prefer the committee approach, with especially since DA and R, they don't know if their funding can actually work on that. So I think that we need to flush it out a little bit more to see what's the actual certain before we move to approve even the conceptual of the project, because we don't know. You know, we could have it, approve it, and then find out, you know, tomorrow, next day, by the March meeting that they can't use the funding that way. So I think we could still flush it out, and then even if we can't get the funding, there might be a way to make a smaller scale project with some of the possible stakeholders, would be my suggestion on it, but that's just my opinion.
What would the committee do from this meeting going forward to our next meeting in March then?
Well, I don't think we really need to form a committee at this point in time. You know, we could wait and see what things look like in March. I mean, right now, we don't know anything more than we knew a month ago, and I don't know what a committee would do in the next.
That's what, I'm thinking that we should wait till the next meeting when they come back out here again to our board meeting, with, hopefully with some more better information as to whether this project that we're talking about is even eligible for funding. Anybody else have a comment on that, or Ron?
It seems like we all kind of, at least people that spoke at the last time when they were here, generally thought it was a pretty good idea to pursue. But I guess we need to have the boundaries carved a little bit better, so we know what we can or can't do, or whether something that the EPA might say and has to be part of this deal isn't gonna be something we wanna do and we wanna take off in a different direction. So yeah, I'd just assume not vote on something that we are kind of open-ended and wait a little bit more till March.
The application is due in October, is that right?
I believe October 1.
So we would have some time after our March
Yeah.
meeting to get, jump into it.
Well, we'll need to proceed in earnest. You know,
Yeah.
there's a lot of wheels to turn there, but
Well, one of the things those gentlemen said was that if we needed help as far as this application, they're willing to give us some advice on putting that application together.
what I envision is they'll probably do a big part of the effort in actually writing it up, since
Oh,
they're
okay.
experienced in those things. They're gonna want to work back and forth with us on that. But these applications add up to something on the order of 25 pages worth. I think is
Sure.
kind of typical, and there's a lot of boilerplate stuff in there. But they're familiar with the process, and I think that's their typical approach. And oftentimes, once one of these projects is up and running, you end up with oftentimes a project coordinator. Hiring a project coordinator tends to be part of the deal. At the front end of this, I don't know that would necessarily be a requirement, but I think as the project would grow, it would soon grow into that in all likelihood.
Okay.
But
So is the consensus of the board then that we wait till the March meeting and they can come back out here and update us on the status of our request?
well, that's what I'm hearing, and I don't think I'm not gonna put a motion on
Okay.
the floor. I don't think it really matters one way or another at this point in time. I guess, I will feel free to continue additional discussions with them, once they hear more. There's nothing to prohibit me from, having initial discussions with them. And I guess, as long as we're on the topic now, I guess I would ask the next question, as far as at the next meeting, do we want to consider this as a voting item? I guess part of my logic in just voting to proceed would make it clear to both DANR and to the other partners that might be out there that, this is really the direction that we're looking at proceeding on, and just kind of put it on record that.
Sure.
But are there other thoughts from directors on that end of it.
Well, you're kind of the contact with those folks
Right.
representing the board, and I would think that you would be in communication with those folks between now and March. And if it looks like they've got some information for us that's positive, we could have it as an action item on the
Sure.
next agenda.
Yeah.
Have you identified any areas of the district that are likely candidates for a project?
Many of them. One is basically your backyard or front yard, but
Like that?
Right, yeah.
we'd done a field trip, during the day before our last meeting and looked at some of these areas. We, looked closely at Star Village, which has been a pilot project for us, and areas such as the School of Mines, all the black shales in that area. We looked at Raider Park out there by Stevens High where we've been working, and all the red shales in that area. Took a drive down 79 down to Black Gap across the hill, and there's, down in those areas, a lot of that is the highway right-of-way. We'd probably be looking to bring DOT into it. Basically, the construction of 79 many decades ago had never revegetated properly, and so
Can the application encompass more than one locale?
it would, the area that's been talked about is specifically coincides with West Dakota's boundaries, Pennington County west of the Cheyenne River, and that also coincides with that of the Pennington Conservation District. They would likely be one of the lead partners with us, and their area is specifically the same as ours. That portion of Pennington that's east of the Cheyenne River is in a conservation district with Jackson County. So anyhow, the areas work out, pretty nicely, and
I think it's gonna depend on how much money that we could obtain too,
well,
through that program.
there's, in just the arena of fixing these erosive areas that, the really nasty ones there's much more than what could be done in one several year project, which is typical. It would take, quite a few iterations to fix all these areas just kind of within Rapid City and nearby, and I haven't even started looking out in the kind of the ag lands out here. There's area, we've got a lot of badlands country out there that's national grasslands holding, places that are just naturally erosive, where that's just how it is. We don't need to fix it, but there's a lot of places out in ag land that might be a real good fit with, the conservation district to partner on. So basically, the whole area would be fair game, and I think typically what they do is we don't necessarily identify as part of the application the specific areas where we would fix. We might say more along the lines, well, we might bite off, say, 10 acres of erosive steep shale and areas to be determined. We might identify things such as, grassed buffer strips within fields, as a typical best management practice. So, again, I'm kind of speculating there because these guys are the experts, and I hoped we might talk more about that. But so that's kind of my understanding of how it would start out.
I move we defer this item to our next meeting, Mr. Chairman.
I second that.
Seconded by Robert, to defer this to our March meeting. Any discussion on the motion? Yes.
I don't think we need a motion to defer. If I don't make a motion to vote on it, I think we just end at the end of our discussion. There's nothing to defer if I,
Just that item.
right, I've not made a motion, there's no need for counter motions, and I think
Well,
that's it.
it's an item on the agenda we approve, so I think we need some sort of action, whether it's a motion or just a common
It's not gonna hurt
acceptance,
to
that we'll
defer
defer
it,
it.
in my opinion.
So Doesn't matter
I
to me
think-
if that's the
I
drilling.
think deferring it gets it on next month's or next meeting's agenda too. I think that's good.
Okay.
I'm
Any,
cool with that.
any other comments? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Robert, second.
Ackerman.
You get her?
Yeah, got it.
Okay. All in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Dan, for all your work.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Maybe Craig could mute his phone.
Did you hear that? Dan? I mean, Greg?
Oh,
You're,
no, what?
we're getting some feedback from your phone, like you're crackling,
Oh.
like you're reading the Rapid City Journal.
But it might be it's laying on my computer now, so maybe I'll mute it though until I got something to say.
Okay, appreciate it. Okay, moving along here. Item number
11.
11. Item number 11. That's me. For the people from the public, the West Dakota Water Development District obtained a future use permit for Missouri River water back in 1976 for 10,000 acre feet. And every 7 years, we have to renew that permit with the Department of Ag and Natural Resources. And it's coming due this year. It was 7 years ago that was the last time we did that. And so this particular item is to approve funding, what was that amount? $895 for the permit, for the renewal, to get this permit renewed for another 7 years. And we have a letter that Dan Malloy is going to send. Have you sent it yet or not?
No,
Okay.
you guys have a copy.
This is kind of, we looked at the last letter we sent 7 years ago and added a couple bullet points regarding what our board has done in the meantime, having the commission of studies with the South Dakota School of Mines and with Banner.
Do you want me to pass out the copy?
Yeah, if you want to.
With that
Sure.
feasibility study part on it, or do you want the one with the feasibility study? I printed off both.
Doesn't matter. They're kind of the same.
Yeah.
Anyway, basically telling the Water Management Board what we've done since the last 7 years.
Is
Yeah.
this different than what
I had one with.
Anyway, as he's passing that out, and then the other thing is we worked with the group of water users when they developed the creation of the Western Dakota Regional Water System, which is actively working to bring Missouri River water to western South Dakota and to our West Dakota Water Development area also. So
Could somebody tell me where that 10,000 acre future use permit, where that water's coming from?
the Missouri River,
Oh, it is?
yes,
Okay, thank you.
yeah, from the Missouri River. So anyway, this is an action item. We need to approve $895, and there might be some additional costs to have this, what's the term?
Yeah, they'll put a legal notice in the
Legal
paper.
notice.
And the paper will send us an invoice for that.
And we don't know what that is, but it's not gonna be much.
So I guess I don't really know if they're gonna do all 3 papers or how they would do that. I have to ask them.
Okay. So the motion should be to approve $895 plus the additional cost to put the legal notice in the papers.
Yeah, the legal notice is basically saying the water board will take up this agenda item probably in March.
And DANR puts that in the paper, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, and sends us a bill. Is there a motion for approval of this? If not, I'll make the motion to approve it.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Scott. Discussion on the motion.
I think Ron had talked to me about a couple minor edits. Do we want to do that, or should we take that outside the meeting? Because it.
I don't think it needs,
Okay.
we can, if we
Got it.
need to adjust it, we can adjust that letter, but
Okay.
that's fine.
No, that's fine.
So any other comments, discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Item number 12. Approval of the solicitation to fill the administrator's position. And Tom's been handling that
Yep. So
with the committee.
With the committee. So I met with some of the committee. Craig was unable to meet, but we had talked about it. Unable to talk, and we had a discussion. The committee had decided that we are going to, because of things have changed a little bit from what we have done and what possibly could change, especially with that Water Smart grant, that we are looking to open up for solicitation for the program administrator position. If you see this paper, this is the proposed want ad that we might put into the paper record, and then we are going to keep the one that says West Dakota administrator position description onto the website with contact information to review and ask for submissions. We are looking at an application period from the 22nd to February 10th. We are requesting a letter, and I'm just completely blanking on the next specification of requirements. And then the committee will review all possible applications, and then hopefully have something by the March meeting to move forward. So I think what we are looking for today is approval from the board to move forward with the solicitation and possibly costs for putting up the ad in our papers of record.
Okay, so is this going to be in the paper then?
I
The
hope,
advertisement for
I
this
hope to
position?
put
Where is it going to be?
Just this. This will be the paper.
just this. This is the ad, which would refer them back to the website
Oh,
to get the more detail, since ad space is very expensive.
okay.
So that would be the short blurb with the information, and then we would hopefully post our description and contact of how to.
Has everybody seen this or not?
It was, Dan printed it out, and it was right over there, but I have extra copies that I can pass out as well.
Has everybody got a copy of that? Okay. I guess I hadn't seen it.
So,
Just for protocol, I'm gonna move to approve.
Okay.
And kind of go into discussion.
Okay. So, motion for approval from Ron. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it.
I'll second.
Seconded by
Yeah, let Craig second it.
Craig. Seconded by Craig. Okay, now we're open for discussion on the motion.
So anyway, yeah, we've been working on this, I guess, since the committee was formed. I forget how many meetings ago that was, but the committee consisted of Thomas as the chair, Craig Kerr, who's on the phone, Scott McGregor, and myself. And so we've collaboratively worked on both the position description, length of service, kind of looked at the salary, that we're looking to offer. And then, most recently worked at this little brief advertisement that would be in the newspaper that would direct interested persons to our website for a full description of the position description. And, I guess what the background is, I think we talked about it at one of our previous meetings, is that we've been operating on a year-to-year basis for a little while since we had a longer-term contract expire, with Dan.
Right.
And then Dan has indicated that he's had some interest and thoughts in, actually retiring from this job when the current contract period ends at the end of July 2024. So that may or may not be true. He may submit, his name into the hat here. But given the timeline between now and when we might want to hire somebody, and get them underway, our next meeting is in March. it's unlikely we'll have anything, you know, to offer to the board at that time, other than maybe information on some people that have submitted. But we haven't gone forward with we're going to have gone forward with you know, any kind of an interview process. And make, so then we're into May, you know, before we make a decision on somebody, and that gives us essentially, I think, if I remember the meeting schedule right, one meeting where a new person would be able to have followed Dan around a little bit and go through one meeting before he would actually, or she would actually be, you know, the new administrator. So it isn't like too far out to kind of get this process going. The only other thing that I guess we talked about, and it's probably germane to this, and maybe Thomas wants to bring it forward, but the committee talked about, you know, the protocol on how we wanted to, you know, actually go through this selection process. So we get this all out and we get some respondents. The committee thought that the committee ought to do, you know, those sort of interviews with prospective candidates and make a recommendation to the board versus having the candidates come and make some kind of a pitch to the board, and then have a board, you know, try and make a vote, you know, at that time, where we might end up in executive session because of personnel matter. And it sounded like it was complicated.
Yeah.
So our recommendation would be to go through this process. As Thomas said, we'll set up a shell email account for submittals, as well as have, you know, the applications come to the office, and then the committee would engage these candidates, and hopefully candidates, and interview them and make a recommendation to the board for action. Probably in May, but you never know, it could be in March.
Okay.
You had actually worked in the previous admin hiring when it was the official search. Do you have any words of wisdom or comments?
They presented themselves to the whole board. I think there were three. There were three. So that, but they came before the board, and then the board, each gave a presentation, short presentation to the board, and had their credentials handed out, of course, before the meeting, and then the board actually decided who to hire at the board meeting.
Is
That's
it
how it was
okay
done
for
last
me
time.
to make a motion?
So I mean, we can do it any way we want to. I mean, that's just the way the last one was.
I think Dan has.
You can?
I just wanted to, I'm not sure, I read through that, and I'm not sure if you intended the pay to be $2,200. That's actually what I had on my last contract. I'm getting a little bit more now, so I don't know if I wanted to mention that in case that was not intended, but that's just a detail, I guess. But from my point of view, I'm willing. I guess there are a couple things I'll throw out there. You know, if you want to talk to me about going another year or so, maybe two beyond what you've got now, I'm open to that.
Well,
The other option would be I just apply to this solicitation, because, you know, that description is basically what I'm doing, so I know exactly what I'm applying for.
One of the rationales, and I don't know if this is my place to say, but one of the rationales that the committee put forward is that we want to engage this person for a 4-year contract, subject to, you know, an annual performance review. So we avoid this wonderment about year to year, and we have continuity as we have the every 2-year cycle of directors change, especially with what's happening or likely to happen, you know, in this upcoming election with several directors not running, and then, you know, the next election comes here, and there's several directors that are they'll have 2 terms of service in, which seems to be, at least right now, sort of the benchmark on when they flip. So we have a potential quite a bit of churn here in the next two election cycles, and we thought it would be good to have an administrator who would be carrying through those time periods without this year-to-year kind of business. No offense intended, you know, we've enjoyed your stuff, but we just thought we wanted to have that continuity with a 4-year type contract.
Okay.
I just have to say, he's gonna be damn hard to replace. He's done such a great job.
Oh, real good job.
Yeah.
So what we're looking for today is
The approval
Approval.
of the solicitation and approval
Approval.
to pretty much submit the one ad into the papers so that when it does incur costs, that within reason that it would be allowed to be reimbursed if that's.
so your motion was
Just to approve the solicitation, which is basically,
okay,
put the ad in the paper, put this on the website.
okay, and then who seconded it?
I think I did.
No, Craig did.
Oh, Craig.
Craig seconded it. So,
I did.
you're still open for discussion on the motion, if anybody wants to discuss anything more. You do, Dan?
I have one other question, and that is, do we have to limit to just the papers? Are there other options? I mean, South Dakota Employment. There's also, we got a couple of universities that have alumni in the area. Are there other places we should look for these candidates?
That's a good question.
If there are message or job boards that are reasonable, feel free to we can talk about putting the ad in. It's kind of knowing where it is. Like, I did some auxiliary looking outside of the three papers that we previously had as our papers of record. And like for the Keller-Land employment, that was going at about $99 for a 30-day period. And then I looked up Black Hills Help Wanted, and they were looking at $250 for a 30-day period for an ad. And so usually what I'm noticing is with larger companies, they are trying to tie into a larger network and use other partner sites that they associate with to go. But I would see, like, if there was a job board at the local universities, I would be open to possibly putting that as an option, since we do have partners at those universities. Every once in a while they do conduct stuff, so I'm open to that. I think the biggest thing is to get the item approved so that we can start the process. But I think Dan had his hand up.
Okay, Dan?
Well, couple things. There's quite a bit here to digest for just having the piece of paper show up. It really just showed up today, correct? It wasn't in the
Yeah.
meeting packet. We typically try to make such items available, give the directors some lead time on it.
We've been into a snag with a bunch of holiday coordination, so we didn't get her done.
Yeah.
It really would help to have a little more time to digest. One of the things that I'm digesting, so of course in previously we had proposals, that had been from our existing administrative manager for basically continuation of services, and basically he was proposing in essence a fee. Here we're proposing the fee as opposed to soliciting what the fee would be. That's change of direction. Like I say, digesting the fee, fixed fee of $2,200 per month. You said that's actually less than what?
Well, right now, my latest renewal went up to about 2,400 almost. So I just wasn't sure if maybe you were looking at an earlier version.
It might have been, but yeah, we can adjust that if that's something the board wants to do. But the fixed fee solicitation was based on, I guess, a couple of different items from the committee's perspective. One, we basically have changed quite a bit of what we're asking of an administrator versus what we might have asked of an administrator when we had these other consultant groups, engaged, or even some of the past administrators. They're pretty well restricted to, doing the basic bookkeeping, taking care of the publication of various required documents, and basically running 7 meetings, per year. And we've kind of got an idea from Dan, basically, on what this position is in terms of part-time. They're in the office 4 hours a week versus doing the rest of the stuff, at their convenience at home. It's a very part-time position, and so we felt that a fixed fee solicitation was what we were looking for. We aren't looking to have a bidding war between somebody who wants 70 grand and somebody who wants 80 grand. We know what we want as a part-time job.
And I will say, the last time we did it, I mean, we had those three, and they submitted their proposal, and it was in excess of $50,000.
We also did a time study we haven't done it this last year, but when we had other folks on the executive committee, Linda Harris was on there, we did a little time study. We asked Dan for several months to kind of give us his time allocations and what he was doing, when he was working on things for the water district, and when he was in the office. That's when he was in the office 2 days a week, and so that also helped guide us in terms of the fact that this is a very part-time position.
Yeah, I'm aware that the demands of the job are, it's nothing approaching a full-time job, but so in terms of a fixed rate, basically starting out now, and what we're proposing is that someone would lock in through August of 2028, correct?
Correct.
So I guess we've not built in any sort of inflationary increase into this.
That's something we can do if we so choose. And maybe it's faulty thinking on my part, but or the committee's part, is that this is a part-time position. It's not somebody who's going out and looking for the job they're going to have to feed the family. So it's likely going to be somebody who has other means to support themselves, whether it's a retired person, a semi-retired person, somebody who has an interest in this that wants to take it on as a supplemental part of their interest in water resources for the district. And a fixed fee, therefore, was probably as good as something with an inflation cost of living deal, because it isn't a salary position.
Well, to me, the inflation we've been through these last 2 years, it'd be a little on the painful side to be thinking, well, I've locked myself in at this rate, and obviously, I guess I'll say it that I would be much more comfortable, tying an inflationary increase to the consumer price index.
That's what Social Security does.
And I guess in fairness to our existing administrator, I'm pretty aware we've gone through reductions in the amount we're being charged, and if Dan is interested in applying for this job, I'd certainly like to see him to be able to apply at the same rate as if he were continuing on from where he's at now, instead of taking a cut in pay to continue the service.
No, I don't disagree. I must have read the wrong contract when I was reading them. I only got so much stuff on my computer. I must have read the wrong one.
You're making $2,400 approximately an hour.
$23.99.
That's pretty close.
It was a 10%.
Put us at 2,400 then.
I'd say start at 2,400.
Well, that's 20. You're currently at $2,400 a month through August.
August, yeah. Through July,
Through July.
Through the end of July.
right.
Right, so I would be inclined to add a CPI increase to that amount. And maybe, given the time frame we're in, maybe we wing that at $2,500 a month.
Start, okay.
So, do we want more discussion on it? I mean, let's continue some more discussion before we change the motion.
Dan?
I guess before you vote, what's gonna be the mechanism for people who have questions? I'm not sure that I should be the one answering questions for.
It will be to the email address that is provided, but I wanted to, before I created a email address, I wanted to make sure that the board approved said thing, and then it will be allowed for contact so you can forward it so that it covers, so therefore, if you do apply, that no one's gonna holler if we do decide to go with you, that you
Yeah,
hit
I
every.
don't want to make
Yep,
it look
nope,
like I'm.
it's gonna be
Understand.
it's gonna be probably my name with an email address, and I can get that figured out. But what I wanted, because of the timeline crunch, was to make sure that we could move forward with the solicitation, that the board approved what the committee had worked on.
Because the office phone number is on the website, so I probably will be getting some calls on it. I'll just say email.
Yep. And we'll have that, and if you do get a call, just give them my number directly and say, and I will handle that.
Yeah, okay.
So
Like I said, I'm interested in staying on, but the 4-year thing, you know, I don't know how you would enforce that anyway, but I wouldn't want to commit to something that was perhaps that long.
Going back to your question on the CPI, what language would you propose to put in there, if any, off the top of your head, to get that accomplished? Or is there some generic language you'd like to see in there about a negotiated fee increase tied to the CPI on an annual basis?
Well, I think, for starters, relative to the 2,200, so.
We already did that.
Right, so everybody's comfortable with 2,500 is roughly a 3 to 4% increase. Is it not as simple as saying that there would be an annual increase to be tied to the consumer price index? I mean, that's.
Well, that's what I thought, but I
Right.
just wanted to know.
I think
if
that's what
you
you
were
meant.
thinking.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much standard procedure for every federal government employee.
Social Security is that way.
Retirement,
Yeah,
I mean,
Social
it's-
Security is that way.
Sometimes they tweak it different ways, but the consumer price index comes out every year, and
Yeah.
it seems straightforward.
I guess my next question would be, just to play the devil's advocate, let's say we have another one of these deals where we have, 7%. Does that mean we're gonna give this individual a 7% raise? See, is that what we do?
If that's what the CPI is,
Yeah.
yeah, it would be, yeah. And this year, the Social Security was 3.2%, right? Yeah, 3.2%.
Yeah, the 7 and 8 or whatever.
It was 8,
Yeah.
8 something last year.
Not enough to cover the.
I seem to have
Medicare Part B.
a sense that there are some of these things that sometimes they cap it at, be it a 5% or
I think that's a good idea.
whatever, but,
Yeah, let's put that in there as a cap of 5.
CPI with a cap of 5?
Yeah.
Okay. Is everybody agreeable to that?
I worked for many, many years for the state, and there was no 5s ever.
You never got it.
well, I feel like maybe I'm at the point that I would whether, I don't know if we want a substitute motion, or how do we want to address the,
I have something I want to bring up, first of all.
Go ahead, Scott.
When I started on this with the committee, I was under the clear impression that Dan was not desirous of continuing, and now here I hear that that's not true. I would be very reluctant to start off on this, and as long as we have Dan here and he's willing to carry on. So I would be more comfortable with the executive committee first meeting with Dan to see what could be worked out to continue his contract for a period of time than going through this procedure. And frankly, although I was on the committee, I would not vote at this time to go ahead with this procedure absent that discussion. And while I've got the floor, another question I want to bring up with regard to capping this kind of thing, and I don't know where it would fall, but we have to be very careful with the kinds of conditions, restrictions, benefits, what have you, we place on this if we're going to keep it as an independent contractor and not as an employee. So I'd want to look at that a little more carefully, just what, you have a position, but just because you call it an independent contractor doesn't mean it's an independent contractor. I haven't looked at it for a few years, but there are certain conditions and factors that apply to whether a position will be deemed an employment position or a contract position. And if we start talking about things like raises tied to consumer, I'm not sure where that all falls.
Well, I'm not either.
I know what to look for, but I'm not sure right now.
I'd call on you, you're an attorney, used to be an attorney. So.
I'd be willing to look at that, but again, so I guess I won't make it as a substitute motion unless there's a feeling that it should be, but I would be more comfortable with first having the executive committee meeting with Dan to see what can be worked out, and if something can't be worked out with, and then going ahead with this advertising of a position. Because my understanding is this was a vacant position, and we were looking for somebody only because Dan was at his limit of putting up with us and didn't want to
I
continue
think
on.
it started out that way.
Yeah,
Well,
but I hear that's not the case anymore.
It changed in very recent times in terms of his, expressed interest in continuing on.
And I'm quite happy with what he's been doing
I am
for us.
too.
So if that can be worked out and we can avoid
Skip
general,
putting it in the paper then, right?
I would like to try to do that. And I think the appropriate committee to talk to him about that is the executive committee.
Yeah. Well, we got a motion.
So that puts just another comment. That puts us into a situation where if we do then wait until we move, until we take action on this until March, and we don't work out a deal where Dan's willing to commit to a 4-year contract, which is kind of what we all decided was important in terms of continuity and carryover, then we're stuck in terms of 3 or 4, then we're stuck in terms of our timeline. We have a vacant administrator position sitting there by the time we get anybody hired. So that's a consideration from my
Maybe that's
perspective.
something Dan would be willing to do, is to carry on until we can get somebody on board at some point.
Would you extend your term to 3 years? I don't want to put you on the
First of
spot.
all, it's kind of my fault that you guys probably assumed I was leaving, because I've kind of implied that eventually I want to get out of this. I guess to answer your question, the 3-year, I'd rather do something like a 2-year, and then, but as it turns out, a lot of times I'm willing to continue anyway, so you can kind of look back at my past history and get an idea of what I might be doing in a couple of years. The 3-year, I would have to think about that.
We got a meeting in March.
But if you put this decision, if I went for 2 years, for example, you're still doing the same amount of work to replace me then as you would now. Plus, I'm 2 years down the road doing what apparently people are satisfied with my job performance. So.
Yeah, we didn't do an evaluation, and you and I had a discussion about that, just because he was gonna be through.
He was gonna be leaving.
He was gonna be leaving, so we
Yeah.
didn't
We
do
did a lot of things, we didn't do a lot of things we might have done.
Well, yeah.
We were under the impression you were leaving when this contract ended.
Yeah, I apologize, and it kind of came up quick for me, or I would have said something sooner.
But should we amend the motion to have, I guess I'd say something like, have the executive committee meet with Dan in the next week and decide if something could be worked out to extend Dan for whatever period is reasonable to that committee, 2 years or 3, and then defer any advertisement and hiring until closer to the end of that period. And if nothing can be worked out, then to go ahead and advertise basically what we have with the salary adjustment. Here in about 2 weeks, advertise it.
I mean, we could do that, I mean, if that's what the board wants to do.
That gets pretty complicated for framing into a motion.
It does.
What would be the possibilities, since we're trading thoughts, under the duration portion of this solicitation? I mean, right now, our motion, our discussion on the table is a solicitation that would go out, and to which Dan could be one of an unknown number of applicants.
Correct.
So, what would be the option of looking at a fixed duration of 2 years with options for up to 2 years of renewal, which would be a maximum of 4 years? Is that something that, as a board, we could throw on the table?
Sounds good to me.
Just a comment,
Go ahead.
if it's okay.
Yes, okay.
That completely disassembles the idea that the committee put forward to have a 4-year term to take care of this continuity issue. Then we're back to 2 years, and then we got, in the middle of another board change. So it kind of flies in the face of what we discussed as being important. Maybe we should have had you on the committee to get involved in this at that, early stage.
I don't think it's just me. I've heard from one committee member that says,
Well,
oh,
the purpose of continuity, which I think is a good one, was tied to the terms for which the board members are elected, which are 4-year terms. But of course, every 2 years, we have, half the board up for election. So you don't really need 4 years to get that continuity. I mean, we did want to get into a situation, where we had the administrator actually running things because of vacancies or elections of new board members or something like that, so that we had it all put together. But as long as I've got the floor, I'm also not in favor of subjecting Dan, and I'm a little leery because this is a personnel matter. We should probably be in executive session. But if we're all happy with Dan's service, I don't know why we would force him to dump himself into the pool along with everybody else.
Well, sounds to me like there's still some questions here.
Well, I'll make a substitute motion that the executive committee within the next 2 weeks meet with Dan to see if a renewed or an extended employment agreement can be worked out to his satisfaction and the satisfaction of the committee. And if not, that Thomas be notified, well, he's on the committee,
he's
but
on the
be
committee.
notified, and we go ahead with the publication of the employment notice.
Okay, did you get that? Yeah. Is there a second to the motion?
No,
Seconded by Dan.
Can you say it again, Mr. McGregor?
I tend to forget things after I said it. Let me try. Move a substitute motion that the executive committee meet with our current administrator to see if an agreement can be worked out for the continuation of his employment. And if not, we have that meeting within 2 weeks, and if not, that we go ahead with the advertisement that has been proposed and solicit applications for the position.
Dennis seconded that motion, so discussion on the substitute motion. Seeing none? Okay, we got one.
How do we want to handle the discussions regarding the cost?
Well, I think at this point, that's, something that's subject to negotiation.
Well, I mean, right now, the motion is that if something doesn't get worked out with Dan, then we solicit. And what exactly do we solicit? Do we solicit this piece of paper, or do we solicit the discussion we'd had for starting at 2,500?
We solicit that, but if we come upon a good candidate that would say, well, I can't do it for 2,200, but, I'll do it for 25, we have the flexibility in those negotiations on interviewing and hiring a candidate to make those proposals. Quite often, or you could publish it as a salary range, which is quite often what you have anyway. You don't normally go into an interview knowing exactly what the salary is going to be. That's always a point of negotiation.
Well, I think we have a committee that did all this work, that we need to, if this doesn't work out, and we're gonna advertise it, we better know here tonight what we're advertising.
Well, and the furthermore is, if there's going to be a negotiation, with our current administrator, it needs to be in parallel with what we're looking to solicit. I've expressed that I'm not really comfortable with starting out lower than where we're at now and with no inflationary.
I think we decided to change that though, with our discussion here.
Mr. Chairman, I would suggest we dispose of the substitute motion, and if it passes, then we go back and revisit these conditions of the employment and make changes to that as we need to
Okay, is that okay with the second?
before we finish this topic.
Okay, so we're back to the original motion to approve what the committee put together for this position, administrator position.
No, what I'm suggesting is that we vote on the substitute motion, have the executive board meet with Dan.
Oh,
And then after that motion is disposed of,
Oh, I'm sorry.
come back and revisit this.
okay, I'm sorry, I thought you were
This
saying you weren't gonna.
Position
Okay,
description.
so we're back to the substitute motion.
Right.
Sorry, I misunderstood what you were saying. So, is there any more discussion on the substitute motion? Seeing none, all,
Should I read this?
go ahead.
I paraphrased.
Okay.
Substitute motion by McGregor, did we have a second?
Dennis, yeah.
Okay. Seconded by Fleming. That the executive committee meet with Mullally to see if an agreement can be negotiated to continue his employment. If not, the solicitation will be posted. Is that?
I believe that's it.
capture?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Is there more
I guess for
discussion?
discussion, I'll vote against it because of my previous concerns. We don't really know what they're going to negotiate relative to what's on the piece of paper here, and then also because the intent had been to have continuity, and my perception is the continuity is not tied to directors. The continuity is specific to the administrative position. The directors come and go. The administrator is where the real continuity issue resides, but in my opinion. Anyhow.
All right, any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the substitute motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Opposed? Right.
Dan Driscoll, motion carries with Dan Driscoll voting no. Now, Are we done, or we can,
No, I would go back to this, and
Okay.
I think there's two real, I only see two areas where we seem to have a disagreement or a concern, and that's on the length of the term and the pricing.
I would agree with that.
And I would suggest on the pricing, we advertise it that the contract will, will run as negotiated from, up to, $2,500 per month. Or we could do like, the salary range of $2,200 to $2,500. And put it in that way rather than saying it's $2,200, Most positions that are advertised with the salary mentioned at all, they're mentioned as a range. And it seems to me the low we've done here is 22 to 25, or the feeling is put it in at 25, that would be okay with me.
Well, my understanding is, in your discussion, that you thought it was 2,200 and it's actually 2,399 right
Yeah.
now. So I think the suggestion was to go 2,400.
Yeah, and then Dan thought it should be, already a raise, in case of recurring contracts, so I think we just put it in at 25.
That's fine.
I would
That's fine
agree with
me.
that. I think
Amend
we
that
just-
from 22 to 25.
Just say
I wouldn't put a
25.
range, I just put the
Just,
fixed fee.
I agree with Ron, just say
Okay.
2,500. And then the term,
And then,
the other was term.
then the other one was a term, and I don't have a real problem with 4 years. I tend to prefer 3 for the reasons I discussed before, is that when you give somebody a contract, you're bound by that contract. Absent, claims of
It
breach or
sounds- It sounds like
misperformance.
if Dan's interested, which it sounds like he is,
Uh-huh.
is 3 years is probably more, I wouldn't say sellable, but
Well, I would rather see something like 2 years with the 1-year option, if everything is kind of like we did when Rollinger was here.
so it is,
We went 1 year with 2-year option,
yeah.
but,
Just as a comment, as a part of the committee, that's what we're trying to avoid.
Okay,
We want to have a length of term that's at least 3 years, and
Okay.
preferably 4.
okay.
None of this every year, we gotta wonder.
Dan?
What exactly is on the table right now? Is it what the wording would be if we end up with a solicitation?
Yes.
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 Right, which in essence would end up as presumably a starting point for the executive committee discussions.
Which is something different than you might end
To
up
some
with in
extent.
talking to Dan,
Yeah.
That's gonna be complicated. What I'm hearing, generally speaking, is we do think the continuity of administrator is important going forward, so we avoid the 1-year wonderment. And Scott's more inclined to think 3 years, but thinks continuity is important, but 4 years isn't out of his wheelhouse.
right?
And my opinion is that I'd like to see a 4-year term, just for the sake of a couple different director changes, and the continuity of the administrator. Dan just voted against a motion, because of his interest in continuity of an administrator. So I think that's an important element.
How long would you like it to be, Dan?
My point was that I think the continuity rests entirely with the administrator and really had nothing to do with the change in directors. It's just a comment.
Is a 4-year term as stated in this document agreeable to?
I'm not opposed to it. I'm a little reluctant. The desire of the committee had been to go after a 4-year term, and that has been thrown on the table now. I'm reluctant to intervene there. I'm not reluctant to state, the 2,500 per month as a starting point makes very good sense, and, for me to vote for it, there also would need to be, a raise tied to consumer price input. I think we're looking for people, quality people, and to think that whether it's a 4-year term or whatever, that there would be no inflationary increases is a very non-standard practice that.
Well, I think,
I think we're going to have the executive committee meet with Dan, but if the board wants a 4-year contract, that might be I don't know if he's going to accept that, and are we wasting our time meeting with him for a 4-year contract if he's not going to accept it? And then we start the process of advertising.
So are we open to motions on what this document would look like?
yes.
Yes, we
Okay,
are.
so I will make a motion that the starting fee would be $2,500 per month, with an inflationary increase tied to the consumer price increase, but capped at a maximum of 5% in any given year. And that the term would be for 3 years and renewable for a 4th upon contingent on board approval.
Is there a second to Dan's motion?
Capped at 5%?
Capped at a maximum of 5%. Yeah.
I second.
Seconded by Robert. So we got a motion and a second. Discussion on the motion.
I guess I have an observation on the continuity issue. If the executive board is successful on retaining Dan, I don't see that as a big continuity issue, whether that's 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year, whatever, because we've got Dan who's continuing, having been there several years. I think our advertisement, though, is where we really need to worry about the continuity. So, in other words, if the executive board rehires Dan and only gets him for 2 years, I think that'll be acceptable for continuity because he's been there and he can still train the next administrator.
I would agree with that. I think a lot of Dan's experience with this helps with the continuity issue.
Well, with the executive board meeting with Dan, we should bring something back to the March meeting then.
Yeah.
For a motion from the full board.
I am concerned about the motion based on that consumer price index increase, but I'll look at that, but I'll vote for the motion.
Okay, any more discussion on this is a new motion, right?
Right.
Yeah,
And,
okay.
and my understanding is that it is applicable to what would be the wording of the solicitation that would go out if one would go out. Is that
Right,
everybody
right.
else's
Everybody understand that?
understanding?
That's what we'll do.
Yep.
Okay, all in favor of Dan's motion, indicate by saying aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
The other way we could do it is the way the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity apparently does it, decide what you want, and then put out your request for a proposal. Decide who you're gonna hire first before you put out the RFP.
Okay, well, that took a little while.
Can I make one more comment, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
If we did put out this solicitation, then I assume I would get from the committee a document that just click on it and it would tell them what to do.
Yep.
And
That would be taken care of. And you and if we get to this part, you and me are going to be friends on one of those Mondays, and we will get it pretty much hashed out.
Fair
So
enough.
because
Well, I want to thank the committee. You guys put a lot of work into this, and I mean, it generated some discussions, but I think in the end, we got a plan here, so going forward. Thank you very much. Let's see, that was item 12.
Sheriff's comment.
I have nothing this evening, other than Happy New Year. Items from directors.
I got something.
Thomas.
First, I'd like to thank the admin committee working with me and helping me learn this process. I know Ron, Scott, and Craig were all invaluable with different areas of expertise, and I just wanted to personally thank them for the help and being a willing participant.
Thank you. Anything else from any other directors? Dan?
I suspect it would come up under the next agenda item. You've all seen email about the question marks that remain or exist regarding our voting areas and voting lists. You know, the background on it was that, you know, Dan was able to obtain voter lists for the even-numbered areas with no charge from the auditor's office. I guess the Secretary of State said they would have to charge you, but if the auditors would do it for free.
The Secretary of State actually sent me to the auditor, so I didn't even have that. At first, I thought there would be a charge.
Anyhow, they said they could do it for free, and as it turns out, it takes them just a matter of minutes to do this. But they were able to only pull for all 4 areas together initially. Well, it turned out it was as simple as suggesting to them that they first pull area 2, then 4, then 6, then 8. So once those lists come out, I was, you know, looking down through the list for Dennis's area, because we know Dennis is vacating, and that's always our hardest area to fill. And pretty soon I found a name that didn't match the map, and come to find out the maps that had been posted were the old maps, not the new maps. So we eventually got with the guy from DENR, and we got the right map. Well, and it still didn't match. So by the time, you know, Dan had talked to the Secretary of State, and we ended up with the auditors, and we come to find out that following the redistricting, the updated information, the new redistricted areas did not go up the ladder, presumably to the Secretary of State's office, and that was basically statewide for all of the water development districts, we think, correct?
Well, we think it's county dependent, but we're not I think East Dakota was okay.
Well, I think they had found this out earlier or something. Well, anyhow, the bottom line is that the map that now exists on our webpage, we think is accurate. And one of the maps is there's a hard copy map that was generated from, there's an online map also. It's pretty easy to use, and you know, the guy from DANR thinks it's correct. In the meanwhile, the voter lists that had come out definitely are not accurate, and it's going to take the auditor's office some time. They're going to have to shuffle to where when they go in to make a retrieval, it retrieves the voters from each individual precinct or whatever correctly. And so we don't know when that will happen exactly. The auditor, this wasn't good news for the auditor, she says, or for the person. She said, well, this won't be fun for us. But at any rate, I guess that the voter lists will become available when they become available, and I don't know. I guess at that point in time, if it appears that the lists match the mapped area, that will bring some comfort level. So,
Very good.
anything you want to add to that?
Well, I think we're lucky that Director Driscoll found that issue. I don't know where we would have been if this thing had been put off. So.
Well, it would be a big pain if people were submitting petitions. The signature.
Outside of the area.
The other thing that ties into that is the Secretary of State has a voter portal where you can verify your voting information, legislative district, school district. For some reason, it doesn't have water development districts, and it doesn't have some other things, fire districts. So I called the Secretary of State's office, and I also mentioned this problem, which is separate. And that's when we got a call from the auditor, and I think I kind of poked a hornet's nest, because she got a call from the Secretary of State. Might have got yelled at, I'm not sure, but anyway, I think we've got things on the right track. Although the voter information portal, they have to send out a work order to their vendor, and they're not. I wouldn't have any hopes that that's going to be fixed. But maybe when we get to my items, I'll go back to that for a second. That's all I had.
Yeah, all right, well, you're up next.
Oh, well, I'm gonna go to Pier tomorrow, or tonight. I'm not charging the board, I'm just doing this for my own enjoyment. And,
Who's your psychiatrist?
plus my wife's there, so.
Okay.
The Water Development District, as I mentioned last time, is having a legislative day, so they're I'll set up our poster at the third floor of the Capitol, and then there's some South Dakota rural water system stuff going on. And while I'm there, I'll probably just pop in the Secretary of State's office and see if being there in person helps push this fix and all through the voter portal. But, so is that, you should have got from me what you made this in 2023, so if I don't hear otherwise, I'm assuming that for our 1099s. I gotta do a financial report to the state. We talked about CBs. Everything should be up to date on the website now for the election petitions. I think that's all I got, Mr. Chair.
Did you talk to the Secretary of State or the election supervisor?
It was the election supervisor. I tried to talk to Mornay Johnson, but I didn't get through. But last time when I was in here, last year, when we had that legislation, I just went into her office and went up to the secretary and said, I'd like to talk to Monet, and she said, okay, go on. So who knows, maybe it'll help.
Okay, now we're down to items from the public. I know we have some guests here that would like to visit with us, so who's, go ahead.
Jason Rice, Green Valley Sanitation District. Just kind of giving everybody an update once again on our project. You all awarded us a grant of that $125,000, 2019, 2020, I can't remember when it was, but kind of right before the whole COVID thing happened. And so that did put a lot of delays on our project. But now, so far we've spent $148,452 on surveying and getting everything up, and that's not with the PER, that's outside of the PER. And I asked my engineer for an update on that as we were sitting here at this meeting. So that's how much that we spent so far on it. The survey with our engineer and whatnot, it's to 85 to 90% complete. We did submit everything into the PER into DANR at the end of the month, or end of December, and we are back on that state water plan and for funding. So that's where our project is at currently. I don't know where it sits with the board's aspect of things on allocation of your monies to the district, but that's where we're at.
Okay. Well, usually when we grant this money, as I mentioned to you, we like to, before we give you the money, to have all your funding lined up.
Yep.
So we know our money, our money's going to be used to complete the project. It's kind of our position as a board. So I don't know if the board wants to do anything different, but
I think when you're ready to actually start construction, put it in, just tell us that, you're underway, and we'll give you the money.
well, usually if you have all your funding in place and the engineer is doing final design, we will fund that. They can ask for the money at that point.
So, yep, that's where we're at, I guess, and like I said, an update where we were at, so.
What's the cost of the project increase to?
Yeah, initially before the whole COVID thing, we're at like 9.7 million. After COVID, it swelled up to 23 some million. And so now we're back down, so we went back and we, instead of the gravity fed, sewer system, now we're at a pressurized system, and which dramatically reduced that cost once again. And so now I think we're at that 9.3 million, and Scott is on my board too, he may know, but we're in that high 8s, low 9s range right now. So,
Yeah, we're definitely under the 10 million mark, and still working on how we can get it down lower.
So you're on the state water plan, and so when are they gonna act on your,
yep, and so we had that 2.3 million from before COVID, and that expired, and so, or will expire. So what we did, we turned it back, and got back on the state water plan. Since we hadn't used it, we were still on it. We just renewed everything, and we're looking at end of March approval for that. Andy Brule with DANR said that all they're going to do is just redo the paperwork with new dates, in a sense. So they're rolling that over into the current. I think it's good for 3-4 years. So we'll be in that new rollover for another 4 years on that awardance of that $2.3 million grant.
so the board has to act on that, right, the Board of Water and Natural Resources?
I believe so, because it's all going through their process right now.
Because you're in competition with other projects, is that right or not?
In a sense, yes, but it's earmarked for us already because we didn't use it, so
Okay.
it's earmarked back, same amount of money back to us again. According to Andy Brule.
Well, I would say just keep us in the loop on it like you're doing. I appreciate you coming here and giving us the report here tonight, so.
I just
Joanne.
have a technical question on that project. They know where, this is sewer lines, right?
It is sewer
Do they
lines.
know where the sewer lines are gonna go? Are they gonna go in the right of way?
Yeah, because it's
not
a-
under the ditch, or not under the roadway, right?
That is correct. Because it's pressurized, everything's going to be bored now, and so there will be no disruption of all the streets and whatnot in Green Valley.
Okay.
Yep.
So just one point, I'm in the geological survey,
Mm-hmm.
and we have several monitoring wells that are just off the pavements. They're in the right of way. So I want you to be aware of that.
Right.
I've already had, during the road work, they told me they weren't gonna damage the one well, and yeah, they took it out.
Oh, yeah.
So I had to go out and retrieve the pipe, so.
Yep.
And then we just abandoned another one because of the development of some lots north of the one street that goes into Green Valley. So we're down to probably 7 or 8 wells still there. And I would like to be notified. I can give you a card.
Fair enough, absolutely.
Because
And-
if
yeah.
it needs to be taken out, then we need to come out and abandon it. So, okay?
Fair enough.
Very good. Anything else from the public? Barry, you got anything?
Nope.
All right. Meeting adjourned. Thanks for coming, everybody.
Good meeting, everybody.
I hope we got one more out of you.